If you are an investor, you're an investor from outside the sector, you're not experienced in the fitness industry, or you're a trainer maybe that came into some money or have a rich uncle or whatever that wants to invest and help you open your own gym, I think franchising can make a lot of sense. Additional context, I do think there are companies doing great work in the franchise space. So I think there are franchisors, companies that are doing a great job providing great franchise opportunities and really doing some good work in the industry. Beautiful people, we've got a fun one today. Let's talk about franchising. So should you franchise if you are a successful gym owner? Should you go ahead and jump on one of any number of models and franchise opportunities that are out there today and throw your hat in the ring and open your own franchise? Spoiler alert, I don't think it's a great idea for lots of folks. I'll tell you about why. Now, context before we get into it, and I make all my franchisor friends mad. I am answering this question from somebody who is already a successful gym owner and operator of their own business. They're experienced, they've got great margins, they've got a really solid model, they're great at delivering their service, they've got great retention and numbers over time, they've been able to delegate and have a team around them, like they've got their shit together, right? And so I'm answering it in the context of somebody that's asking the question from that seat. Now, if you're just an investor, right? You're an investor from outside the sector, you're not experienced in the fitness industry, or you're a trainer maybe that, came into some money or have a rich uncle or whatever that wants to invest and help you open your own gym, I think franchising can make a lot of sense. Additional context, I do think there are companies doing great work in the franchise space. So I think there are franchisors, companies that are doing a great job providing great franchise opportunities and really doing some good work in the industry. I also think that fitness is a fantastic sector. Now, before I say all this, this is not financial advice, it's not legal advice, I'm not a lawyer, I'm barely licensed to drive, and even that's at risk, right, every time I get out on the road. And so I think it's a great sector to move into. I don't think that the whole AI craze is going to replace in-person trainers anytime soon. So until they can create an android that looks, speaks, and talks indistinguishable from a Mark Fisher or insert your favorite trainer here. Until the robots can really do that, I don't think trainers and in-person training is going to be replaced. I also think that if the big C word pandemic taught us anything, it showed us that hey, people still crave that in-person community and interaction. And so I don't think the fitness space is something that's going the way of the dinosaur anytime soon. I think there's a lot of room for growth and it's a great sector to invest in. So if you're outside the fitness industry, then I think the franchising thing can make a ton of sense. However, for the successful individual independent operator, I think there needs to be some more thought given to it. And I don't think franchising is a great idea for a lot of you. Here's why. So the biggest benefit of franchising as an idea, if you ask me, if you ask people that are thinking about getting into the franchise space, it's the whole business in a box thing, right? It's just I'm going to give you my money and then you give me everything. You're going to give me more money over time, right? You give me the systems. You give me the hiring of this, the onboarding of that. You tell me where to put my space. You tell me how to market it. You give me all these things. And then I'm going to make some cash. I'm going to spit you some of that cash every single month, but I'm going to end up coming out ahead, right? I'm going to open it. The floodgates are going to open. People are come beating down my door to become members at my gym. Yada, yada. I end up rich and on a beach somewhere sipping Mai Tais, or my 20 franchise locations just spit out cash for me. But unfortunately, the reality is if you get the chance to have an honest conversation with folks that are operating some of these franchises or own these franchises, even at some of the more high reputation models or offerings out there, it still comes down to the operator. So it still comes down to the person that you have managing or operating that facility. They still have to have a great personality. They have to be great with people. They have to be on top of their shit. This is not a McDonald's where you're going to hire a 13-year-old to cook chicken nuggets or whatever, right? It just doesn't work that way. And so the business in a box thing kind of falls apart. And to be fair to you as the successful independent operator, you may very well be overvaluing not necessarily the quality, but the difference in quality between what you're doing in your facility and what the franchise operation is doing in theirs, right? So I don't think the gap is that huge. And in a lot of cases, you as the independent operator may very well have better systems to serve, or at least that you believe in more to serve your clientele than what these franchise operators might put together, right? I don't think the gap is that big. And so look, if I was getting into the restaurant business, my culinary expertise stops at breakfast cereal and PB&J. If I was getting into the restaurant business, I would absolutely be looking at a franchise, right? It makes perfect sense for me. I don't know anything about the restaurant business. I don't know pricing models. I don't know how to sell. I don't know how to make the food. I don't know how to hire for it, any of those things. Most of you aren't necessarily that far off of being able to do those things and open your next location, right? And if you are far off, you don't have systems for how to hire, how to onboard coaches, how to scale the operation, how to price it, how to run pre-sales, how to select a space, any of those things, I can pretty much guarantee you that you can learn how to do those things. You can close the gap for a lot cheaper than the $30,000, $50,000, $100,000 franchise fee and the 6, 7, sometimes a higher percentage even than that of the top line revenue that the franchise is going to charge you every single month. They charge you that percentage every single month, regardless of if you're profitable or not. So you could be 10K in the hole every month. You're spending 60, you're grossing 50, you're 10K in the hole. Guess what? That franchisor is going to get their 6, 7, whatever the percentage is for that respective franchise. They're going to get that percentage of the top line revenue, whether you're making money or not. It is not a profit share. It is a gross revenue share that you pay regardless of what your P&L looks like. So you say, well, what about the marketing? What about the brand recognition, all that fun stuff? Good question. So if you're a psycho like me, you might have spent your burgeoning years as a entrepreneur reading franchise disclosure documents, these really fun things called FDDs. What these are, essentially, they are legally required to be accurate. Things that the franchise company, the franchisor, has to submit to the government. They have to be audited by an outside party. They are legally required to be accurate. Are there ways that the franchises can sort of get around it? I'm sure there are. I don't know. They are legally required to disclose all of the different opening costs and the performance of their different locations and so on and so forth. So you can see basically the entire product and business model that these operations are throwing out there. So follow-up question, what's the biggest company that you think of when you think about boutique group fitness, right? If you're like most of us, if you're like me, you probably thought Orange Theory. Now, I invite you to go look at Orange Theory's franchise disclosure documents. The interesting thing about that is that Orange Theory, the biggest brand of boutique fitness in the world, thousands of locations, this crazy reputation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Each Orange Theory location is required in their franchise agreement. This is in the FDD, disclosed for prospective franchise buyers, right? Or anybody that wants to look for them online. Each Orange Theory location is forced to spend $40,000 to $50,000 on their marketing before they even open the doors. And so you say, well, no. Like I'm going to get this franchise because the brand recognition is going to be through the roof. I'm going to get so many clients because I put a given franchisor's name on the wall, right? Instead of my, little mom and pop name. Well, look. If the biggest brand in fitness is having to spend 40 to 50 grand to market their location, that's before they've even opened the doors. That is their pre-sale minimum. If they're forced to spend that much, don't you think whatever franchise you're looking at or Orange Theory or whatever it is going to force you to spend that much? The brand in fitness just honestly isn't that important. It's not going to get you the thousands of members that you think you're going to get when you open up your franchise. Summary, you're still going to have to market your ass off regardless of what franchise you go with and spend a lot of money to freaking do it. RE, the marketing, a lot of times you also lose the flexibility that you have as an independent operator. So you might be limited to, you can't run this type of offer, right? You can try, like we've had franchises work with us that like try to go behind corporate's back and like do it this way and that way and what have you. And it's always this like shady legal thing that I don't always feel super comfortable with. But these franchisees are like, they're forcing us to sort of do this and this thing isn't working. Please help. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. And so you're banking on the folks at the top of your favorite franchise, whatever thing you're looking at opening, being on the cutting edge, being up to date on what's working best in the current fitness landscape. And I mean, the reality is I think a lot of these guys, they've got more going on, right? They're worried about marketing their franchise. They're worried about making sure that they're legally up to speed. They're worried about making sure that their other systems are on point, right? They may not always be up to date on the most recent marketing stuff. And a lot of them don't work with your boys here that are constantly like 24/7 worried about what's working best in the fitness right now. How can we make our gym owners the most money possible, right? They're not necessarily going to be as up to date on each individual social media platform and things like that because they have a bajillion other things to do. I don't think it's reasonable necessarily to expect every franchise to be completely up to date on what's working now in fitness. They've got a bunch of other stuff to worry about right now. So you don't have the flexibility. You're probably going to be forced to run plays that may or may not be the most effective thing at a given point in time. You're going to have to spend a bunch of money doing it. And so if you are an established operator with a somewhat established local brand, would you rather spend all that money building some franchise's overall organization, or would you rather have it fill your pockets, right? You think about the opportunity cost of that capital that you're spending just on the initial franchise fee a lot of times is 30, 50, 75, sometimes 100K. Well, shoot, like you could do a lot with that 100 grand, right? You might be able to open, 2 locations instead of just like basically getting your foot in the door and paying for the right to open, to spend another couple $100 grand opening up your first location with that franchise, right? And that's before you've even started marketing. Next thing on the list, valuation and exit. So one of the absolute pros of franchising, I'm not anti-franchise. One of the absolute pros of franchising is that it can be easier to offload in the event that you ever want to exit from your business, right? A franchise can seem more attractive to an investor than like a single location local mom and pop, right? But what are investors looking for? Investors are looking for cash flow, mitigation of risk, right? How risky is the deal? And then they want to look for upside. And unfortunately, we say, it's going to be so easy to just sell my franchise. If I ever want to get out of it, I'm going to be able to sell it for so much more money than if I do my own thing. Well, I invite you to go to bizbuysell.com, No free shout outs, but dang it, this is a free shout out. Go to bizbuysell.com. It's a listing for businesses that are for sale. And I can pretty much guarantee you that you're probably going to find some franchises, established ones, 9 rounds, any times, that are selling for pennies on the dollar, even though they're from these really established franchise brands. What's going on with that? The reality is, if your franchise location doesn't have cash flow, if it's not profitable, if it's not an attractive thing to the buyer, it doesn't matter that it has a purple logo or a red logo or whatever it is on it. People aren't going to pay a premium for it. And so if you're a great operator, and like we help people open multiple locations all the time, if you're a great operator and you've opened your second, some of our folks have opened their third, fourth, fifth. One of our clients next year is opening 4 in the next year to get to number 10 of an independently owned brand, right? Really impressive operator. These guys have great cash flow. They've got great margins. They aren't beholden to a franchisor that tells them, oh, you can't do this. You can't run this marketing play. And also, if you get really good at this and you run on the franchise model, you have to pay for territories, right? And so a franchisor might say, yeah, great job, doing your 3 locations in this local market, this territory that you've paid for, but someone else already bought the territory next door that you wanted to open in, and so you can't do that. Or if you get this great opportunity, one of my friends just opened one like across the country, right, from where he lives. He might not have that flexibility if he was in a franchised model, because legally, the bottom line is a lot of times your franchisor can tell you no, and you have to eat it and shove it and pay your 6 to 7% of your top line revenue. Other downsides, if you're a franchisee and part of your franchise agreement is paying whatever percentage, I've heard 2%, I've heard higher, but you're forced to pay 2% for a regional or national or whatever marketing fund, and the franchisor doesn't do things to help you with that money, sorry, you're shit out of luck, right? Like, eat it, deal with it. You sign an agreement. And so as a franchisee, it's like, I feel like the comparison is typically like, oh, what if I'm really shitty as an operator, or I do this franchise thing? Like, if you're really shitty as an operator and with systems and everything else, and you're really, really shitty with marketing, then yeah, like a franchise is probably going to be better. But if you're really stinking good and I'm an investor and I'm looking at your situation, I kind of might like the fact you've got 5, 6 locations. You've shown that I'm not buying a job. I'm buying a business. I'm buying something that does not require my labor to go in and collect my check, right, every single month. If you're independent and I can look at that P&L and see, oh, well, like 6% of this top line, that can go to my pocket instead of the franchisor. Oh, 2% of this marketing fee, well, we don't have to spend that marketing fee, or we can be strategic about spending that marketing where it makes the most sense and we have control over it. I've got the opportunity to take this locally established brand and potentially turn it into my own franchise. That happens all the time in the restaurant business, where these local mom and pops do really well. They get to a couple locations or a few trucks or whatever it is, and then big investors come in and say, oh, I want to buy this thing because I don't want to be beholden to XYZ franchisor company that is going to, put me in handcuffs or whatever else, like force me to operate by their rules. I want to operate by my own rules. I'm going to buy your established business because it's attractive to me as an investor, and I'm going to take it to the moon, right? There are different options here. And if you're really stinking good, then it's like harder for me to find arguments where the franchise route makes sense. Sidebar, your franchisor may be able to stop you from selling the business if you sign that in your agreement. They may get first right of refusal. You may be like, I want out. And they say, you can't sell it to that person. Tough shit, deal with it. That said, when do I think franchising makes sense? So franchising does have a lot of positives. The valuation positive is absolutely a positive over a 1 or 2 location like mom and pop thing. Another strength of going the franchise route is that it can be way easier to get access to capital faster. So some of these folks, if you came into a bunch of money or you're sitting on a big pile of money, you say, yeah, I don't want to do this like stepwise growth. I don't want to go about it that way. I want to open 10 locations in the next, 1 or 2 years, right? You're starting at 1 and want to open 10. Well, in that context, you said, yeah, like, great, let's go the franchise route. Let's just throw money at it. You might say, well, what do you mean access to capital? A lot of times these franchises that are more reputable, they will have a relationship with the SBA where it is way easier basically for you as the independent operator to get funding, to get an SBA loan while opening that franchise than it is for you to get a loan for your individual mom and pop. Now, a lot of the folks, like when we teach opening a second location and kind of scaling things up, a lot of times we'll have folks start with just cash flowing the business, right? So it's just like pure profit. You're not having to deal with the risk of dealing with the bank. No one's going to come take your house, whatever. And then as things get better, then maybe you look at lending options as you're more established, you've got your together, et cetera, et cetera. The guy opening, 10 locations, like getting to 10 locations next year, he played nice with banks. So it's not an A, B, either or type thing. So can you typically get funding and have great relationships with the bank faster by going the franchise route? Absolutely. Can you also create great relationships with the bank and have great lending sort of options available to you as an independent operator over time? Absolutely. But that is a strength of the franchise game. And you can typically open more locations faster up front, right? You can go from like 0 to 10 faster than you would on your own independent model. Now, are there costs to that? Yeah, like your initial franchise fee, your 6-7% of every dollar that you ever make forever, the flexibility in marketing and doing what you want to do, or opening locations where you want to open locations, et cetera, all those things. But there are strengths, right, to the franchise model. And so I think the overarching theme of where it makes sense to move into this franchise model is, like, let's say you just don't want to build anything, right? You don't want to come up with, you don't want to bother to close the gap on the stuff. You'd rather pay a few $100,000 to have somebody else have already figured it out for you than to, like, spoiler alert, like, shameless plug. One of the guys running he's a partner in our Build Your Gympire business. One of the guys that helps run that is up to 4 locations. I think he's going to open a couple more next year in our Gympire mastermind. There's a small group mastermind. It's application only. We've got like 10 members. We're not trying to make that some big, crazy, huge thing at this point. In that mastermind, like, over half of those individuals have either opened or are in the process of opening their second locations literally as we speak, as we film this video. You can figure out how to open locations profitably and how to scale your operations for a hell of a lot cheaper in our mastermind. Even though we're raising the prices on it, like, you can pay for probably a lifetime of being in our mastermind for less than what the initial franchise fee is of your average franchise. I'm not talking about like, oh, the entire build out, and you're going to have to spend 300 or 400 grand to open your first location. I'm not talking about the 6-7% revenue that you're going to have to pay forever. I'm talking about the initial franchise fee that's just like gets you in the room. So you can figure this stuff out cheaper. However, if you say, I don't want to figure out how to build it, I don't want to do any of it, like yada, 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 like I'm just sitting on a pile of money, I almost want to think about this as an investor. Dude, if you're just thinking about it as an investor, then by all means, I think the franchise route can make a ton of sense, particularly if you're thinking about it like, dude, like this would be the equivalent of me getting into the restaurant business. I'm just like investing in the fitness business. So shameless plug aside, I do think franchising can make sense for a heck of a lot of folks, right? Particularly if you're outside the sector, if you're just thinking about this as an investor, or if you're an inexperienced like business owner and you've got somebody that's like, oh, I want to be the manager of the facility. I've got somebody else with some money, or I came into some big inheritance and I want to be a gym owner, whatever. I think those situations can make an absolute ton of sense. I think if you're a super successful owner of an individual gym, you're doing pretty well, you've already got some systems in place, I think you would be shocked to see how poorly a lot of these franchises do and how much it still comes down. And some of them do incredibly well, right? However, most of it comes down to the operator, right? It comes down to the person running it. And so long story short, I think it just warrants more thinking than saying, oh my gosh, look, this person that I look up to, this smart person, etc. Like they're all jumping on this franchise. I see this individual's model and they're opening more locations all the time. I see Orange Theories up or whatever it is, right? Whatever franchise it is that you're looking at. I think it warrants more thought and really looking at the numbers and looking at, okay, what is the gap? Like how far off am I? And would I rather go this route and suffer these limitations or go my own route and have to deal with figuring things out, making more on your own and figuring things out like a little bit more independently? Are there downsides to going it on your own? Absolutely, right? At the end of the day, you've got to look at the upsides and downsides of each situation, choose your own adventure. Best of luck, love hugs, rooting for you regardless of what you decide to do. Talk soon.